So if you've known me long enough, you know that I'm a big fan of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. I mean, it's only one of the few shows that I'd be willing to watch within the past couple of years. And after watching and rewatching the show, I think I have a fair assessment of what my top 10 episodes would be by this point. Now, if you want to skip through all the boring intro stuff that I'm about to talk about, you can skip ahead to the time marker on the screen where I start talking about my top 10 episodes. But otherwise, just stick around. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic could arguably be my most favorite cartoon ever. It's a show that really resonates with me and my personality. How the characters are portrayed and how easy it is to consume the different themes in the world makes it a pleasure to watch. The writers of the show really knew how to captivate an audience, and with how big this fandom got, I think it speaks for itself on how well crafted the show was. I wouldn't have given My Little Pony a chance if it wasn't for my friend Shadowflare. He more or less introduced me to the show, and I don't regret it one bit. Now before diving into my top 10 episodes, I feel like there are a few ground rules I should cover. 1. I'm not including season premieres nor finales, as I feel like they have an unfair advantage to making it into the top 10 list. I'm not saying that these episodes don't deserve the praise that they should get, but I do feel like they should be in a category on their own so we don't let all the other episodes get overshadowed. 2. The list does not consider the My Little Pony movie, shorts, specials, nor anything from Equestria Girls. 3. This is my personal list of top 10 episodes. I had a hard time choosing what my top 10 episodes were because there are just so many good episodes. And if one of your favorite episodes didn't make it in the list, please understand that I'm not saying that my opinion matters more. This is a subjective list after all. Alright, now with all the intro stuff out of the way, let's get on to my top 10 My Little Pony episodes. If you know me well enough, you know I love a good mix of life lessons with wacky humor, and Secrets and Pies feels like the best combo of the two. The episode begins with Pinkie Pie showing how much she loves to bake pies for Rainbow Dash in honor of her accomplishments. And while Rainbow Dash appreciates her acknowledging her achievements, Pinkie notices that Rainbow Dash doesn't actually eat her pies. This makes Pinkie suspicious of Rainbow Dash if she actually likes her pies. Now on the surface, it may not sound like that big of a deal, but what I love that this episode does is that it goes into Pinkie's fears that Rainbow Dash is scheming of a way to sabotage her by destroying her pies. It sounds really silly, but why I like stuff like this is because I've been there myself. I take a situation personally and think that someone is out to get me. I've done it toward my family and my friends, and it's not a fun place to be. So I can totally see where Pinkie's coming from. Yet at the same time, I can't help to smile and laugh at a silly scenario like this. And it helps me kind of find my personal matters much easier to swallow when it comes to something similar to what Pinkie dealt with. I talk more about this episode and how everything got resolved, but I'd rather you see it for yourself instead of me giving it away. I always like a good heartwarming story that helps me feel better about myself, and Flight to the Finish is definitely good at that. The episode starts out seeming like it's an episode about the CMCs competing to represent Ponyville at the Equestria Games, but later on we see that it becomes more about Scootaloo's insecurity with not being able to fly. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon tease Scootaloo for being a Pegasus that can't fly, and that no pony would ever let a Pegasus who can't fly represent Ponyville. So in order to overcome her conflict, she changes the Cutie Mark Crusaders' routine for representing Ponyville at the Equestria Games to include her flying in it, while trying really hard to be able to fly and do the routine. Things get sour between Scootaloo and the other Cutie Mark Crusaders as they felt that the routine was great before Scootaloo changed it. Yet bringing a friendship problem to Scootaloo on top of her supposed problem with not being able to fly. I could talk more about what happened in the episode, but to sum up why I like it, I like how it indirectly draws a parallel with someone who is disabled or perhaps neurodivergent. I myself am neurodivergent, and sometimes have a hard time knowing how to navigate through the complexities of the world. But the lesson at the end, especially what Rainbow Dash told Scootaloo, was honestly something I really needed to hear.
I didn't want to ruin their chance to win just because I couldn't fly. And who said you had to? But flying's what Pegasus ponies are supposed to do. You flew when you carried the flag in the games.
But that was me. You're you. And it just doesn't matter if you can fly or not.
This episode is honestly an episode that helps reassure me that I don't need to drastically change who I am for the world to accept me. My way of dealing with business is unique to me, and it works. No one has to tell me otherwise. But yeah, I could probably make an entire video on this episode, so let's go on with... I think some of you may not be surprised that I'm including All Bottled Up in my top 10 list, especially considering that I made a video on this episode, but I digress. All Bottled Up is definitely a big favorite of mine. Not just because Starlight Glimmer is in it, one of my most favorite characters in the series, but also because of the lesson taught in the episode. The episode is about Starlight trying to bottle up her anger toward Trixie, and I love how she goes about it too. She literally gets a bottle and puts her cloud of anger in it. It's a really clever way to tangibly represent the concept of bottling up your anger. And it doesn't end there. As Trixie keeps annoying Starlight with just how incompetent she can be, especially showing up that she doesn't have any slight bit of remorse for what she's doing to Starlight, we see Starlight getting more exhausted as the episode goes on. When I saw this episode the first time, it was so on point with just what I was going through in my personal life. I'm someone who often doesn't let on that I'm angry, and before I really knew how to let go of anger, I would always just bottle up because I didn't know any better on how to deal with it. I don't like getting mad at other people, and I don't want to belittle other people either. So I felt like I had no choice but to bottle up my anger. But this episode taught me that it's okay to get mad sometimes. We have to let out what's upsetting us from time to time so we don't keep carrying emotional baggage with us. I have a lot I could say on this episode, but if you want to see my in-depth perspective on the episode, I suggest you check out my video on it in the card above. I'll also leave a link to it in the description below. If I were to pick just one Rarity episode that I love, Rarity Takes Manhattan would be that episode. And I'm glad to say that it made its way into my top 10 list. The episode is about Rarity competing in a fashion contest in Manhattan, while also getting to hang out with her friends as they tour the city. We get to experience the equivalent of Manhattan through the charm of My Little Pony, while also getting a nice musical number expressing how Rarity is the element of generosity. However, the conflict of the episode comes in when one of the contestants, Suri Polymer, steals Rarity's fashion line, all because Rarity thought that she was doing a good deed in lending her fabric to her. A really mean move of Suri, if you ask me. Rarity winning the fashion show would help her advance in her career, and her getting upset about the situation makes a lot of sense. Her friends do offer to help her, so she has a chance at winning the fashion show. However, it did come with the potential cost of Rarity losing her friends as she works them to the bone, essentially showing Rarity being greedy and wanting to win the fashion competition over keeping her friends. This episode really pulls at your heartstrings as it makes you think and contemplate to yourself if winning and advancing your career matters more than keeping your friends. But overall, this episode teaches a good lesson that if others take advantage of your generosity, it shouldn't take away from you being generous toward your friends. It's an episode that I really needed to see myself, not gonna lie. I won't talk about how the episode ends because I believe that this episode is definitely worth a watch. Do Princess of Dream Magic Sheep may sound like a meme-worthy title, but there's more that meets the eye when you watch this episode. And I mean, there is more than meets the eye than just the title. The episode is about Princess Luna going around chasing the Tantibus, a magical wisp-looking thing that goes between Pony's dreams and turning them into nightmares. The episode got lots of good silly gags put into it, and it keeps me wanting to watch it. Especially when we got to the part where all of Ponyville is in one giant dream together. But things get real when it's pointed out to us that the Tantibus gets stronger every time Luna blames herself for her misdeeds. I'm going to leave the description of the episode pretty generic, but why this episode makes it into my top 10 list is because I relate to Luna in terms of beating myself up for past misdeeds. I've had a pretty dark past, and there are things that I regret that I've done or thought about doing to other people or to myself. But by the end of it, The main six encouraged Luna to forgive herself for the misdeeds she had done as Nightmare Moon, and Luna had to find it within herself to forgive herself. You can tell that the writers really cared about the subject matter that they were getting at in the episode, and they really did a good job at tackling it. It's a heavy episode, but one that's definitely worth watching. And hey, after you finish the episode, you'll know for sure if princesses do dream of magic sheep. Boy, where do I begin with this one? I'm so glad that Amending Fences made it into my top 5, let alone my top 10 episodes, and it has every reason to be this high on my list. The episode focuses on Twilight Sparkle trying to make amends with her old friends from Canterlot for not being the friend that she is now to her friends in Ponyville. After learning so much about how meaningful friendships can be, and especially becoming the Princess of Friendship, she felt that it was her duty to make it up to her old friends for not being there for them. Now, while that conflict seemed to get resolved pretty easily, the episode didn't end there, because we learn about one of Twilight's old friends, Moondancer, who lives very much of a solitary life and doesn't find pleasure with visiting with other ponies. Twilight does what she can to help Moondancer see the joys that can come out of having friends in her life, but she struggles to do so. Yet she felt that it's her mission to help share the joys of what can come from friendships to Moondancer, not just because she's the Princess of Friendship, but because Moondancer is one of Twilight's friends. Without saying much more about what happened in the episode, what I want to say is that this episode really does a good job at expressing why having friends can be so meaningful to us. And in my personal life, I remember being averse to making friends, mainly because it felt hard. But it meant the world to me once I realized to myself how much better life can be when you have friends. Another reason why this episode spoke to me is because now that I feel like I have friends in my life, I look at the old friends from my past who seem to live more solitary lives and kind of wish they could understand what true friendship is like. All in all, seeing Twilight and Moondancer's dynamic with one another really hit home for me, as I saw a lot of parallels in my life. And it ultimately made me reflect on how thankful I am to have the friends I do now in my life. Given how shy I was growing up, and honestly still can be, Hurricane Fluttershy definitely deserves a place in my top 10 list. The episode is about Fluttershy having to overcome her performance anxiety in front of the other Pegasi. She feels inferior to the other Pegasi for having a low wing power to the rest of them. She doesn't like competing or anything like that, and she'd rather just not participate in helping to get the water up to Cloudsdale. Though she feels bad to let Rainbow Dash and the other Pegasi down for not wanting to participate, which was her incentive to go ahead and help out with their mission getting the water up to Cloudsdale. But it came with the price of her having to embarrass herself in front of the other Pegasi on how slow of a flyer she was. This episode really hit home for me. I definitely had many of those moments in school and work where I had to do a presentation in front of others, and I'd always be afraid that I'd mess up somewhere. In fact, I posted a video on life lessons I learned from Hurricane Fluttershy when I did my panel at HarmonyCon earlier this year. So if you would like to see my full thoughts on the episode and how I tied it into my personal life, I suggest you check that video out. I'll leave a link to it in the card above, as well as in the description below. But yeah, Hurricane Fluttershy stands at number 4 on my list. Kind of surprised myself that it didn't get placed any higher in my list, considering that Fluttershy is my most favorite character from My Little Pony. Ah yes, Once Upon a Zeppelin. Not to get confused with Led Zeppelin, but it'd be pretty cool if the writers of the show could get the rights to play some Led Zeppelin music in My Little Pony. But anyway, as for the episode itself, Twilight looks forward to spending a vacation with her family on a Zeppelin cruise, but instead of it being a vacation, she ends up having to please the patrons on the cruise with lots of princess-themed activities, thanks to Iron Will. The episode is one that really struck a chord with me because I've often been a doormat with other people, including my family. I often think that making others happy was more important than making myself happy. So when I saw how this episode played out, it was a big breath of fresh air that I needed, as it taught me an important lesson on prioritizing my happiness as well. I'd want to talk more about the episode, but I don't want to spoil it for y'all, and I could make a video talking about my overall thoughts on the episode itself anyway. So on that note, let's move on to the next episode on the list. If you know me too well, you know that I love episodes when Twilight goes crazy, because, well, I've totally been in her hooves when it comes to things that make me anxious, and Lesson 0 did a perfect job at portraying what anxiety looks like. The episode is about Twilight trying to find a friendship problem to solve and report to Princess Celestia before sundown, as she tries to be the perfect student she always has been, with turning in her friendship reports on a weekly basis. She turns the town upside down and goes to all of her friends trying to find an issue, but fails to find anything. The whole thing morphs into her creating friendship problem to then try to solve, but instead, she creates an issue that just blows out of proportion. Twilight's insecurities about being perfect really stood out to me in this episode. I've always been someone who tries to aim for perfection in what I pursue while trying not to make others upset. So seeing Twilight realize by the end of the episode that she didn't need to be the perfect student to Celestia brought a big sigh of relief to me. It definitely made me reflect on how I should try not to take perfection too seriously in my life. Plus, there's a bonus lesson in the episode about taking your friends' worries seriously, even if you think they're not that big of a deal. But yeah, if you haven't watched Lesson 0, it's a must-watch episode in my opinion. I also have a video on my thoughts on the episode, which, as you guessed, I'll leave a link in the card above as well as in the description below. Now, before we get to my number 1 episode, I'd like to point out a few honorable mentions.
Oh, they're not so bad.
Well, I sure am happy to see you, and spending the day with you does sound like a lot of fun, but...
Sure! Just when we're finally back in the game.
Well, I'll hear what you have to say, but every plan I've made for this town is perfectly reasonable.
Good luck convincing me my preservation efforts don't make sense.
I don't want to be apart from you, ever. I'm not sure what we'll do, but I'm sure of us. So sure that I'd marry you today.
I would too.
Yep, Tanks for the Memories takes the spot as my number 1 My Little Pony episode. It may come as a shocker to many of y'all, but I'll explain why it's my number 1 episode. At the surface, the episode seems like it's just Rainbow Dash having to accept that Tank, her pet tortoise, needs to hibernate. But there's a much deeper meaning that lies in this episode. In the episode, Rainbow Dash is constantly in denial about having to part with Tank while he hibernates for the winter, so she tries to keep winter from coming. But as the episode progresses, it's clear to us that she has to accept the reality that she needs to part with Tank while he hibernates. I feel like the scene where Rainbow Dash was in tears about letting go of Tank was played out so well. It really shows what it's like to have to part with someone or something that has meant so much to us. We'll sob and we'll cry, but it's just what we need to do to get over that emotional barrier of letting go of that thing or person. As far as how this episode ties into my life, I've lost close family members, either from natural causes or due to others bringing harm to them. It's a heavy subject that I won't dive into too much for the sake of this video, but to sum it up, Tanks for the Memories is my most favorite episode because it helps remind me that while some of the closest people in my life are now gone, my memories with them will never go away. It's a very heartwarming message that comes across as a gentle reminder in this episode. We know that day will come when we lose those who are precious to us, but just remember that your memories with them will always remain. Well, there you have it, my top 10 My Little Pony episodes. I sure had fun making this list, and believe me, it was hard to narrow down this list to just 10 episodes. I've also thought about making a series on my channel for ranking My Little Pony themes and episodes, so if that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more life lessons I've taken away from specific episodes from My Little Pony, be sure to check out this playlist on inspirational My Little Pony videos. Alright, now with all that said, thanks so much for watching, and as always, we are Eternal for Life.